insert him.
Okay.
And Mary, I was just going to give it just another minute just in case people are still logging on. There's Sylvia. Michael, Fred, Janet. Hi, Sylvia.
And Jason, we have a new member on our meeting tonight, although officially she doesn't appoint it until after our meeting at council tonight, but we invited Janet to join us. She's been, she'll be appointed, we're assuming, appointed at the meeting, council meeting at 7 tonight. So.
Yep, no, perfect. So, all right, I got 5:31, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. Mary got a little of my thunder, but we wanted to welcome our new Parks Board member, Janet, and we also wanted to welcome, we have a couple council members here. We got Councilman Bocci, Councilmember Anderson. I think that's all I see. And then we wanted to recognize the Landmarks and Heritage Board members that are here. We have Glenn and Joan so far. And so I show everyone here from the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. So attendance is noted. And first item of business is we have to approve our minutes. And so if everyone on the Parks Board has had a chance to read those, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move we approve our minutes.
I second.
Alan with a first and Michael with a second. Any other discussion? Hearing no other discussion, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, we have unanimous approval of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board minutes. And at this moment, I think I hand it over to Glenn and he can work to approve the Landmarks Heritage, or am I okay to do that, Mary? Does it make a difference?
If Glenn would like to ask for a motion from his board, since they are the ones that were at that meeting approving it, that would probably be appropriate.
Perfect.
Yeah, all right. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the Landmarks Heritage Board, first of all, we can have a motion.
Well, there's actually a mistake in it.
Yeah, and I wanted to note that too.
Yeah, so I think I don't have it in front of me at the moment, but where it says about the chair and vice chair, I think that it says that Glenn has been also the vice chair, elected the vice chair, but I think they actually decided on me.
That's right.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't see that.
And also there's another small mistake, but I don't think it matters that there's some date at the end of the thing that our next meeting is in January, but I don't think that matters. We all know that's not true.
No, it's been canceled. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Any other comments on the minutes? Can we get a approval of minutes?
Did someone make a motion to approve the minutes?
That's corrected.
As corrected. Yep.
Okay. Who's
Right,
making the motion?
I can move to accept it as corrected.
And I'll
Okay.
second it.
Okay, good. We got approval and seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Right.
Aye.
Aye. All right, the minutes are approved for January 27th.
Perfect. Thank you, Glenn.
Okay. You bet.
And so I had talked to Nick in advance. We had no public comment that was called in before, and I don't see anybody on the line for public comment. So we'll list public comment as none. And then with that, we're going to roll on to the new business and the big topic at hand tonight, which is updating our city naming policy under resolution 2016-2018. And so I think I will turn it over to Mary and she's going to give us a report on that update.
Thank you, Jason. Welcome, everyone. It's exciting to have our LHAB partners with us tonight. So we look forward to working with you tonight on this project, as well as proposed future naming opportunities. We would include you in that. So just as a little bit of a history, our board has talked about this topic quite a bit, and then they were very specifically involved in our last process. And so, but for the LHAB, because you may not have been as involved or heard about the process, I just wanted to provide a little bit of history to you on the naming policy that we have, on how it was utilized, and then some feedback from our city council as well as our park board members when they were reviewing the process. And then we'll have more conversation and be more prepared to share our recommendation with council. So when the city incorporated, not long after incorporation, they came up with a policy for naming parks and facilities. Primarily it was parks, and a lot of it was to do with I think in the early city days, a particular park, military, on Old Military Road was called Forest Park. And so the council at the time changed the name, and the neighbors felt like maybe they weren't involved, or there was history, or there's some conversation. And so the council reviewed this, and this was back in 1997, I think, or something. And for the naming policy, and the naming policy was there. We haven't created a lot of sites, and we hadn't made many changes, so it really wasn't brought up. When we started updating in 2016, believe it or not, we were updating our sponsorship policy, and within that came some naming opportunities. And so we wanted to make sure that both policies were consistent. So we dusted off the old policy and brought it forward, reviewed it quite a bit, and council updated that policy to create a new resolution in 2016 that covered what the process would be. So then the council selected, because it said that there would be a group that reviewed it, and so the council Park and Rec Advisory Board to be a group, since they met very regularly and they were very involved with parks and other issues, that they would be the group that would help send any application through and then bring a recommendation to council. So that was great. And so then we came up with a process, the park board came up with a process in which to look at the resolution that was already created, and then we looked at an application, we looked at criteria that was based on the resolution, and that was what a packet was created in which an individual or a group or an organization could fill out an application regarding a naming opportunity and submit that. So we were able in 2021 to actually utilize this process and review an application. An application had actually been submitted earlier, but the specific application was to name a facility after a beloved council member, Dr. Claudia Thomas. And so, but because our criteria had said that an individual, if they were passed, that they needed to wait 3 years. So that individual said, fine, they called once a year and said, hey, we know there's 2 years left. Hey, now we know there's 1 year left. And in 3 years, they submitted the application, but then they changed the application. They initially wanted that application to be the new Motor Ave, Colonial Plaza, and that they thought that would be a great area to name after Dr. Thomas. But that individual thought that was going to be shut off all the time in a big community plaza area, and didn't realize it was really kind of a piece of a road that could be closed off for events. And so because during that 2 or 3 year period of time, they recognized how that area was going to be used, they said, oh, I'd much rather change my application and now have it be changing the name of that Fort Stoughton Park. The city had recently become the official owner of the land, and they thought that might be a great tribute to this individual. Now, this individual was working independently, was not working with the family or any particular organizations or groups, but just had a lot of respect and care for Claudia Thomas and thought that would be a great honor. So that application was presented in 2021. Staff reviewed it for completeness, gathered additional information, put together a, excuse me, put together a staff report, and our park board reviewed it, held a public hearing at a park board meeting and reviewed that application. And I thought the process went really, really well. Our city clerk helped us with the public hearing portion so that we were doing everything appropriately. But because we advertised for the public hearing, that sent, and you know how beloved Fort Slocum Park is, it created a lot of energy. And although the conversation was very pleasant, because most of the people, I'd say 98% of all the people that responded were grateful for the work of Dr. Thomas, but did not feel that that was the appropriate way of honoring her. And so, and that came through very loud and clear through the public process, through the public hearing, as well as a lot of other miscellaneous information that was presented. So the park board did not accept that recommendation. They did thank Mr. Boyd for his application, but they didn't actually accept that recommendation. And then several weeks later, we presented that to city council during a city manager report to give them an overview and an update. So city council provided great feedback to us. We brought it back to the park board and said, and wanted the park board to review the process since it was their first opportunity to do that. And so the park board had some feedback too. So you're seeing, and I hope everybody was able to review the application or the report that came through. Nikki, can I share with the screen? Would I be able to do that? And I can.
Yes, you should be able to share your screen.
Yeah. So can everybody see that, the screen now?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So what we found is that the process was pretty straightforward and pretty clear. We thought the application was well done, and the park board and council seemed to appreciate the information that was gathered. There was a lot of research that had to be done, but we did receive some feedback, and so we thought this would be a good time to share that and get some additional feedback from LHAP, because during our park board is ready to present this information to city council, but during the work program and review in January, LHAP had suggested that because historic use of a site and making sure that whatever changes might be presented represented, history, current use, and then potentially the future, we'd want to get some feedback from LHAP. Council agreed on that, and so it's a great time to review that. So that's what we'll do tonight. What we did find in the process was that the application part was quite clear. Maybe we could add a few things. That the resolution was quite clear, and it did cover a lot of ground. So then the staff report was quite clear. What got a little bit foggy was the end. After they made a recommendation, what happens next? Can they make a different recommendation than what the application was, or was the park board to look just at the recommendation? It got a little muddy towards the end. And so what we wanted to do was just clarify that in the administrative process, so that it was really clear how we would review an application. So here's some of the feedback that we got from the process. One was, I'm just going to go through this report. So one is that, first of all, are there any questions?
Do you want to hold questions to the end, Mary, or and get through the report, or do you want to talk about them as we get point by point?
I can go through this pretty quickly, and then people.
Okay.
So those on the board or and our guests, if you want to just make a note on any particular topic, we can come back and deal with that directly. So, but the feedback from our board and from council was that the application was pretty clear and easy to review. We really looked criteria items, elements by elements, whether they're applicable or not, to really address them. The one item that didn't really come out very strongly in the application or the report, but kind of came forward if we were thinking, what would we do if the name of Fort Slocum Park, or say you name change the name of a street? What would the cost be to make that? What would be the time frame? Whether you're dealing with light or street signs, addresses, information in publications, websites, And not only to, like, for instance, the city, but what about businesses and stuff? So there really is an impact, and what is that impact? And so, so we thought that that needed to be fleshed out a little bit better in the application process. The one thing that came through is this was an individual that brought an application forward. And one of the things that our council had recommended and really wanted us to get some more feedback on, and we'd really like to hear from you folks too, is that can just anybody in the community put anybody forward? And although this wasn't the first time, it's like, it did create a lot of energy. It created a lot of people that were very concerned the city was taking action. You know, people get very fearful when they hear of something and they don't know the background to it. They don't know even what the process is. And so it created a lot of energy and a lot of fear from people that the city was taking action, that the city was making this recommendation, that the city, you know, was going to do this. And really it was the city received an application, and because we have a process, that was our due diligence to follow this process. It also created quite a stir with, we got feedback from the Nisqually tribe, because although they were included in the, hey, this is happening, what are your thoughts on it? They didn't, again, understand the process. And so it could have created some real relationship issues. So one of the things that our city council has suggested was there needs to be built into this process some kind of broad community support, whether it's, you know, a petition or a percentage of signatures, or something more than just an individual that wants something to be changed. It could be Jason wants, you know, a park name changed after his Uncle Harry, because, you know, Uncle Harry passed away and he really thought he was a great guy. Didn't really have anything to do with Lakewood, but he put an application in. We would still have to honor that application and follow the process. And so really, is there some broad community support to for a particular application, so that we can really you know, make sure that it's worth all of the time and energy that would be put into, and there is time and energy put into any kind of an application for that process. And so what is reasonable, what is balanced, and how might we go about doing that? And the reason I say that is that all of a sudden there were polls on Subtimes, there were hundreds of emails. And so, and that was before we even did the public hearing. And so what would be a good measure of broad public support? The second thing is there were some questions about, can council request a name to name or rename a facility? Can they just make that request, or does it have to come from the community? And of course, our city attorney said council is the final decision maker. They can make an application and a request. And then also, do we want to build in, does that then need to go through that process of review by the park board? The council's always been very supportive of having the park board review lots and lots of different issues and code changes. And so council can provide that determination for us as well. Would they assign that process back to the process, but then the request could come from council? They thought that the criteria and that the summary was good, and it covered all those processes. We did hold a public hearing. It was an official public hearing. It was our first official public hearing, and Vito Iacobazzi actually led that cause, and he did a great job. So there's lots of checks and balances with a public hearing, and so that was done, and we thought that a continuation of having that be done was fine. But again, we got lots and lots of feedback before. And so what kind of feedback do we then share at the public hearing? Do we just do a summary of it? We had pages and pages and pages of emails that were sent. Did we include the notes, the comments that were at the Subtimes? So we really wanted to clarify a little bit about what that process might be, so that we can, so that we are including all the information for the board to have for consideration. But that was a little foggy for us too, is that, do you just gather the information at the public hearing? Do you just take the information that's emailed to the city? Or do you, how does that work? So we wanted to just clarify that process as well. We did want to add, we did want to make sure that because the information was going to LHAB, we wanted to make sure we were building time in for LHAB to have an opportunity to review the application, to review a staff report that went into it. So that will add some time to the process. And would we do that in a joint meeting? Or have you just do that as a review, and you make a recommendation to the application that would be considered by the park board at the public hearing? So we can chat a little bit about that. We had a member abstain, and so it sort of happened during the process, and so we wanted to just get more information on what that means. Can they abstain? Do they need to do that at the beginning? And I'm sure that there's rules of order in which that is very clear. We just knew that we needed to get more information on that. And that would be some training that would occur before the next time that this happened, or the next time we had a public hearing. What are the reasons that are acceptable? And, does that mean that they participate in the process? So again, we were new to the public hearing process. And so we wanted to just clarify that, because there are criteria that are based on how and when somebody abstains from a process, but because we're advisory, does that change? We're not taking action. We're not making policy. We are an advisory board that would be just sending a recommendation to council. So we wanted to just get more training on that. And that would probably be for the LHAB group as well, because you're advisory as well. So again, we wanted to make sure that the timeline was created really clearly so that we can manage expectations, to make sure that there was time for the applicant to provide additional information if it's needed, especially some of those criteria items we might not have all the information on, but the applicant might. We wanted to, it was really important for the park board that the applicant made the presentation, or a designee of that application, of that applicant to make the presentation. They felt like that, and that we wanted to add that to the process, just so that the individual knew that they or a designee would be making that presentation. And the reason for that is that they felt like, and Mr. Boyd did make the presentation, he did a fantastic job, is that the application is going to bring more to the proposal than just the staff report, that they would be able to maybe provide some additional information or reasoning or history that maybe didn't get included in the application. And so the park board wanted to see that included as well. And then make it really clear what they are considering. And for this particular application, the individual started with Colonial Plaza, went to Fort Stillham, and then said, hey, if that doesn't work, maybe the city hall. So it was a little bit confused in the application itself. And so we would make really clear at the beginning of the process, what are you having us consider? So that, because if we were proposing to the community, we want to change the name to Fort Silicon Park, okay? And then the board comes back and says, well, we don't really like that, but boy, wouldn't it be great to do City Hall, which is kind of what happened, or the council chambers at City Hall, or the plaza at City Hall, then what happens? Do we go and send that to the council, or do we need to go back to that public process? Because nobody had a chance to comment on that. They only were commenting on Fort Silicon Park. So again, that got to be a little muddy at the end. So we just wanted to clarify that and make it really clear that what the board would be considering, so that when we are asking the public for input, they are giving us input on either one topic or a number of topics, but just so that we are clearly getting the public input that we need, because it's part of the process. And then when does it go to council? And so we thought, we talked about, do we wait till our board approves the minutes? Sometimes there's mistakes. Sometimes, we don't clearly get the recommendation that the board was considering. And so do we wait until the next board meeting where the minutes are approved? So then they absolutely approve that recommendation. And so we were recommending that within 2 weeks, as long as we're really clear, that we would make sure that the recommendation was clear at that meeting. And then do we do it that night because it's overwhelmingly clear, or do we gather all the information and then come back and do it at the next meeting? And so just to clarify that, mostly that's for process. It's so that the applicant or applicants, depending on who submits it, is really clear on what the process is. And the reason I say that is that because Mr. Boyd started this 3+ years ago and then was coming back every year, for him, this process has taken a really long time. And, sometimes when we do due diligence and that we do a really thorough community process, and some issues are complicated, it does take time. And, the public is the public. And so we want to hear from the community. And so we just want to make it really clear to individuals that this isn't probably put in an application on Tuesday and you're going to know by a week from Thursday what the response is, that there's always a bit of a process so that we can make sure it's really fair to the community and to the applicant. So that is sort of the feedback that we received. Was there anything that maybe, Jason, before we go into what we're suggesting for changes, maybe we could ask if there was any questions or thoughts? Did we forget anything that throughout the last, through the different review processes that we heard?
And I can't say that any better than Mary, but we have Christina with her hand up, so we'll take her first.
Hello, thanks for your presentation, Ms. York. You mentioned something, I couldn't quite catch it in the beginning, but I think you said something about who is able to propose name changes. And there's a little problem with your audio, and so I don't think I caught it quite correctly, but is there some guidelines of who in the community can anybody make a name change suggestion?
Yes, so thank you. I'm sorry if my audio was in and out. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. So currently, anybody can put in an application for a name change. So what
Okay.
suggestion? But yes, correct. So what the suggestion? I said two different things. One is during the review process, because these are really just notes from several different meetings with different groups regarding the process. But two things is one is anybody can put an application in, but the two questions were is one, because it wasn't really clear in the resolution, can council make a request or does it have to come from the community? And so our city attorney clarified, of course, the council is part of our community so that they as a council could put in a request. But the number two thing is that because of the amount of time and energy and resource that goes into a request to change something like the name of a building or park, when we always say it should be the exception, not the norm, that there needs to be some check and balance regarding some kind of broad community support. And what does that really mean? Again, that hasn't been clarified, so we'd like to get some feedback on that. Is that a petition? Is it a poll? Is it an organization of such numbers that it represents the community? What does broad community support mean? So that was what I was saying, is currently anybody can put an application in there. You don't have to be, I would suspect we'd want it to be someone from the city of Lakewood, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It doesn't clarify that.
I know it's just one example, but Mr. Boyd was the son-in-law, I believe, of
No, he
Dr.
has the same name as the son-in-law, but there's no relation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there is a David Boyd that is the son-in-law of Dr. But this individual just has the same name as him, but he was working as an individual and he wasn't working in connection with the family. He hadn't even talked to the family. So
that's interesting, because I thought that must be the relationship that made him
right. Yeah, that was a little muddy too, but yeah, I'm sorry for that confusion, but yeah, so he was just an individual working as an individual, not representing anybody himself.
Mm-hmm. And I had just one more question, well, maybe not question, but comment. So I suppose, it's very important for the entire community to find out about such proposals, like name changes. And I know that the city, if you're on their mailing list, they send you the bulletins with all the kind of things like that. Or, they post on the Suburban Times and on their website, or maybe they post to Facebook. But I mean, I don't think that all those things really guarantee that enough people will find out, because I found out by one of those means and I happened to mention it to other people and none of those other people found out about it. So in this situation and also other situations that the city has, I think maybe it would be good to have some kind of, material, what do you call it? A hard copy of something that goes out every once in a while. I know it's a huge amount of stuff and maybe people can opt out of it, but it just doesn't seem like the city has a good enough way of communicating important things to the entire city. And I don't know how best that could be done.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We'll write that down.
Is there
Thank-
anyone else
thank
that had, you're welcome. Thank you, Christina. Is there anyone else that had comments on the feedback?
If this is Glenn, if I could make a couple of comments,
Sure, you're up, Glenn.
at least to remember. If you rename a street, you've got to remember that everybody that lives along that street, whether it's long or short, has got to change their address. Well, that may happen over a period of time, but it can get confusing. Second, if you rename or if you name a building that had no prior name, for instance, having Claudia Thomas named for the building at City Hall. It's not City Hall, it's the building. And that would be something that I would have no objection to. However, a historic name of a street that got renamed to a certain person, if it was a historic street that had been there for 120 years, I don't think that makes much sense. However, if I'm losing my track of thought now. Well, I'm afraid I've lost it. But those were the two main points that I was trying to get across.
I appreciate that. And Mr. Spieth, what I was thinking is that, and it triggered in my head, maybe our brains are on the same page, is that if we were going to change a historic name of a street or a building, then I know one of the things that you've done, and maybe you're going to talk about tonight, is you guys have put up signs on the street that gave the historic name, so that if it was people knew about that. So were you thinking about that? Like maybe there should be a recognition of the prior name, or more of a honorary name of a street versus officially changing it?
Well, honorary, I don't have any particular thing against it. But let's say, as an example, Fort Steilacoom Park. Actually, close to half of the original Fort Steilacoom Park, or Fort Steilacoom itself, currently resided in the park because it was on the other side, the park side of Steilacoom Boulevard. Actually, it's the whole square mile around Fort Steilacoom that has a National Historic designation, and that includes the Western State Hospital area. So, renaming, I don't think that renaming Fort Steilacoom Park would be appropriate because it's historically been called that, at least since we were a city. However, it's still part of Fort Steilacoom and always was. Now, there may be a way around that, but those were my thoughts.
Thanks for sharing that.
Great. Yep. Thank
What
you.
we're trying to work on tonight, specifically, just to clarify, is that we're really talking about the process and not anyone. I was just using Fort Steilacoom as an example because that was the only one, that was what we got. So I appreciate your comments. And so if an application came forward in the future, then we can talk about that regarding historical designation. But I will write down that, as we consider the past, the present, and the future, which it says to do in the resolution, is that looking at any national historic designation should also be noted in our staff report during the summary. So.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Glenn. Is there any other comments on feedback? Another call. Any other comments on feedback? If not, I had maybe a question and a comment, Mary. And so talking about just the process in that, the first thing that came to my mind was a petition, and having a petition I'm somewhat supportive of, and because we're talking about that broader community support. And the same thing you just said came to my mind as it was said, is what does broad community support mean? If you take for round numbers, we're a city of 100,000, broad community support to me is you're getting close to a majority, but I think that's a pretty high threshold to have to meet. And so, if you were to go the petition route, could you say it's 1% of the population, meaning you get about 1,000 signatures, and that warrants it, where there's been some community outreach, more people are hearing about it, and all of that. And this is a little bit of a comment to Christina, where this is something that we struggle with as a parks board, that I know every municipality, I struggle in my professional work, working for the city of Federal Way, reaching out to the community and getting the message to the community is so difficult. We try to put it on so many sources and places, and just when you think you're going to reach anybody and get a good turnout, it falls flat. And so I think that's a long-standing government problem, and still no good resolutions to it, but know that staff is working their darndest to make as many people aware in the community as possible. And then lastly, I was just curious, that my question is about the board member abstaining, and if any other research had been done on that. I know, and I can't recite them right now, but I know there's about, and if you go to like Robert's Rule of Order, there's about 6 reasons why you can abstain from a vote. And the one that kind of held to me, and I was not lucky enough to be a part of this process. I had to work in Federal Way that night. And, one of the reasons I know you can abstain is being extremely conflicted about the decision you're about to make. And you just don't know whether yes or no vote is okay. And on a certain level, I think that it's a little different than totally recusing yourself from the vote because you've got some sort of business interest or that. And so, I think giving board members the ability to abstain, I think is an important part of the process. And to my knowledge, if you're abstaining, you're just not casting a vote, yes vote or a no vote. It's just you've got reasons why you don't feel you should be submitting that vote. And so I think that abstaining should be part of the process. And so if there's more research to be done on that, I would encourage that. And so those were kind of my comments on the feedback portion, Mary. And I'll go one last call. Any other members want any comments on feedback? If not, I think we're going to go to the current process and suggested changes.
All right. Thank you so much, Jason. So this is the process that we currently have. And again, it's really a simplified process. There's a lot more work that goes into, the managing of it, but this would be what an individual would get so that they would understand what the process is. One is that an application is submitted to the city. The city provides verification of submittal, that just like anything else, it says, "Dear Mr. Gerwin, we've received your submittal. It seems to be complete, and a proposed anticipated timeline for review." And so we would look through the meeting schedules, and when the groups are getting together, what we think if it's something regarding the public process. So we would do that. And so we would then, we might respond later that we need more information as we go into a project, because some projects start out, they seem quite simple, but maybe they get more complicated. So anyway, we would be in contact as we were before with the individual to let them know what the process is and what more information we're looking for, and what the timeline is for that review. Once the application would be shared with LHAB or others to provide input for the report. And so we, especially that historic nature, you may have more research or information on that. And then again, additional methods may be used to generate public input, which is, I believe we heard from one of the members of LHAB, is that how do we really get that public input? Maybe there's a sign posted at the park. For a public hearing, there is very specific criteria regarding how we advertise for that, and we would continue to do that. That doesn't mean you can't do more. Sometimes we've done things like you mail something out within a number of feet or a number of people that live around a particular area, because maybe they have more insight or feedback to that. You could put a sign at the site. So we are just adding that additional methods may be used to generate public input. And that could be as part of the review process as well. So then we would prepare a staff report. The proposal will come to the park board at a meeting where we would have a public hearing and we would gather more public input. The PRAB would review the request and eventually forward a recommendation to city council for consideration. And that doesn't mean that the PRAB couldn't ask for more information. Again, that's the process, is to gather as much information as possible. And if they felt like the report wasn't complete or that there was more information that they'd like to get, they could table the topic and bring it back for future, just like other boards do. And that the PRAB will review the request and eventually again forward the recommendation to city council once they have a recommendation. And then council will determine what the next steps are. And that could say that they want to, they need more information. It could be that they want more public input. It could be that they table the topic, they agree or disagree with the recommendation, and they table the topic and it doesn't move any more forward from that, because council does get to make that decision. And then when they're ready, and if they're ready, then they would add that topic to a future meeting for consideration. So that's sort of the review or the process that we would follow. So is there any more feedback on that?
This is Glenn. I think that's fine.
I see Janet with her hand up. Go ahead, Janet.
Yes, I was wondering, in the application process, is the applicant supposed to meet any criteria, like so that you're persuaded that this is something that would be for the good of the city? Is there any sort of like a site, like they have to be, are there any requirements this name change has to somehow benefit, and they're the ones that need to provide the persuasion that it would be?
The application does allow them to submit why they're putting this request in. So there is that detail. And I think that we had a copy of the application here, but we'll talk about that. And then they would share that. But the issue regarding broad community support, one individual, I might believe something, think it's the greatest idea ever. But it's my idea. It really doesn't have broad community support. So I think that's really what we're looking for is, and Jason had suggested maybe there's some kind of a petition or some kind of a, maybe 1% of the population. So,
well, and I can add, Mary, once this criteria is kind of finalized as we're reviewing between the two boards, that criteria is available to the public. And then, that's going to give them a better gauge as to, what they need to be putting on their application so that it could be received well and properly considered if they're, truly serious about that, if that makes sense, Janet.
I guess I just want to know, like, let's say let's say we wanted to name it after Claudia. Well, let's say the person has to be of a certain type of significance to the state of Washington, or a national person. Like when we changed to MLK Day and we had all these different street name changes. I mean, there had to be some sort of value to the community. Like, are there any standards? Or are we just sort of winging it as we go?
well, the criteria says that the either the name reflects significance of a feature or it's appropriate to the location. It could mean that the individual, provided exceptionally, they were dedicated to the community. I mean, there could be a million different reasons. We have it not so specific that you don't have the ability to make your case as to why you're asking for that. So we don't have, it just says, you can see the criteria on here. We're going to go over that in a few seconds. Yeah, it's pretty specific. I mean, we are going to consider all of these things. This is what's in the resolution. That doesn't mean we can't add to the resolution if you think that that is a good idea, but I think we want it to be general enough that we don't want to tie someone's hands of something, because this isn't just for today. And it's not just about, somebody that served for the last 25 years, as we just did our 25th anniversary. It could be, the next 5 or 10 years, something that's significant to the community. So, maybe it's the tree, maybe it's the barn, maybe it's Mount Rainier serving in the community, or maybe it's a national individual. I mean,
yeah. Okay.
Okay, Thank you, Janet. Looks like we have Christina's up next with her hand raised.
Right. I just wanted to say thank you for the idea of the petition. I think that's really a good idea, for how to gauge public support. But probably 1% would be, you have to make it, otherwise, like anybody's going to feel like they can start, changing this, changing that. And, it can't be kind of too much of a whim. So you got to make that threshold, or whatever you call it, the gauge. You have to make it a little higher, I think. And, in a city of 63,000 or however many we have now, 1% would only be 600. And so should 600 be enough to change like the name of a humongous park like that? That's so important to the city. I think probably if a petition is a great idea, but it's got to, at least 1,000. Come on.
Well,
if not more. So good idea.
I agree, Christina, and I threw that out as a number because, the thing that was mentioned that I heard was broad community support. And when I hear that, it's what does it mean? And it means something to me. Each one of us heard and maybe had a different number in their head. And so with that said, I think if we choose that a petition is part of this, that we have to come to a consensus on what that threshold is. And I'm not certain I know what that is right now. I think that would need a little bit more vetting to.
Yeah, maybe we could look around and compare. I'm sure people have had similar problems, and there are probably some standards for this, so we could look into it.
Agreeable. And the other thing though, like that I don't want to make it is that it's so difficult to get the signatures that, it almost makes it impossible. And so to me, the thing about the petition is you mentioned and making sure that the community as a whole knows about this going on. And to me, that's what the petition would help do, is it puts some of the onus on the person who's asking for this name change to have to go garner that support. And when you go either knock on doors or stand at special events and pitch your idea and get their signature, that also helps us spread the word and is good for that communication line and getting people informed. So that was part of my method behind my
right.
there.
But if you do put the onus on the initiator of the petition, that also brings up the problem of the vocal minority. That person is going to go, it could be obviously a positive figure that we're talking about, but you don't want to give the vocal minority too much power with the petition. So I don't know. It's just
I just want to clarify. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to clarify. This is just to have it reviewed. This isn't 600 to 1,000 people aren't making the decision. That's a council decision. So this would just be to give it enough oomph to say
right.
600 or 1,000 or whatever magic number we pick. Individuals in our community, and probably should maybe throw in our community and not have it be, just random people from around the universe. Think that this is a worthwhile thing to consider. It isn't going to be that makes the change. So I just want to clarify this.
That's a good clarification. Thank you,
consideration. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're basically taking out the lone wolf.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Did you have further comment, Christina?
Oh, no, thanks a lot. That was it.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions on what was that? That was the review process, and any other comments on that portion?
I had a quick question for the recommendations that the board can make. Are there limits to what type of recommendations? Because I know this past time, going through the previous process or the existing process, I think it kind of, as you alluded to, Mary, it kind of threw a wrench in things when we might have made a recommendation that people weren't expecting to look at the city hall, right? And so I'm wondering, is it wide open what type of recommendations the board can still make, or is it more like these are the recommendations you must pick from this list of
I think to make it clear, I think that what we would do is decide when the request is coming forward, what we're asking the board to review. And that way, when we're doing our due diligence for the public input process, we are telling the community, this is what we're considering. So that if we are talking about one topic, say one suggestion, the board really should just be considering that suggestion and not come up with something new, because the community wouldn't have had time to provide input. Now, if an individual was asking for one or two things, we can bring two things forward, but then we would be asking for input on two things at the beginning so that there was really clarity regarding the research that was done on both topics, not just one, that the public input that people were giving, although people might have an opinion between one or the other, but they had the opportunity to give input on both. I think you're right, that was a little muddy. And so we would clarify from the reporting process to the park board what we're asking you to consider. And if anything came out after that, that would not be part of your recommendation, but it could be just extra information afterwards that could start a new process. But it wouldn't, yeah. So does that make sense?
Yep, good question.
Yes,
Thanks, Fred. Any other comments on that? Hearing none, we'll go finalize the review criteria, right, Mary?
Yeah, so I just wanted to share, this is what is in the resolution, and these are the things to consider in the report. We would provide feedback on every one of these criteria, whether it was applicable or not, because some would work or not. And so we'd love to hear if there's anything we missed. And so some of the members that had some suggestions or questions may think that may suggest some clarification or additional things if you think that there's something new. So based on the resolution, and this came out of the resolution, it clarifies that the naming and reconsideration of current parks, facilities, or natural areas, and that's for renaming, or if we're naming something, it is allowed, but it says discouraged. It says we don't want it to be on a whim. We don't want it to be the flavor of the day, that really it needs to have meaning. And so to really have it be a thoughtful process, and that there is critical review. That we really need to think about the past, the present, and the future, and how that name impacts that building, that road, or that land. How does that name or new name create an enduring legacy for the city? And again, we can address that. Will the name remain relevant to the city as the city changes and grows? Does the name reflect the significance of a feature or appropriate to the location? Like, for instance, Fort Silicon Park is significant, based on the history of that site. That's just one history of that site. There's lots of histories of that site, but currently that does. Does the name reflect the current mission and vision of the city? Our city council has a mission and a vision. And so that whatever the current council's mission and vision is, that should be considered as part of the criteria. Did an individual or entity, past or present, did they donate substantial money or land, or has been otherwise instrumental in the acquisition, development, or use of the property? For instance, say we have Kiwanis Park. Back in the day, there was a Kiwanis club that participated, and I don't know if they donated the land or if they developed the park, but the park is named after the Kiwanis Club. We have Active Park, and one of our first mayors used to say, Active Park, why do we call it Active Park? It's an inactive park, because when we started, it was kind of a junky area. But Active Park, the Active Club was actually a historic group, like the Rotary and like the Lions. There was a group called the Active Club, and that, and so I don't know if they donated land or if they helped develop that site at some point. But again, there's history to those names. And so, do you recognize those individuals? When the skate park got created, we had the Lions Club skate park at Kiwanis Park, because the Lions Club really did the outreach and the grant writing, and there were members of that club and the kids in the community that really wanted a skateboard park. So the city at that time named the skate park, it's the Lions Club Skateboard Park at Kiwanis Park. So, everybody's getting their name on the board. Is there broad public support? We've talked about that tonight. Really the request is preferred by residents of the neighborhood or the community, and it creates a positive image. So that's something that we want to make sure we kind of clarify so that we're consistent for everybody that comes through. If someone is considered, if they've passed away, then we need to wait for 3 years. And that's out of respect. And it also kind of keeps you from creating, a lot of reaction and a lot of emotion that, an individual, that happens after somebody passes away, and it kind of gives things time to settle. And, kind of all the skeletons come out of the closet maybe by then too. So, So, and that the individual should really have been exceptionally dedicated or demonstrated excellence in service, or maybe risk their life for the community. You know, sometimes police officers that have fallen in the line of duty get recognized at sites or streets or parks or things like that. So, or it could be one of our military partners. If you're naming a historic place, consideration should be given to the founders of that area, the city or that area. Historical figures are Native American heritage, local landmarks, prominent geographic locations, natural features. That would be things like, you know, we have a great partnership with our Nisqually tribe. A natural feature could be the mountain or a lake, or we have, you know, Wards Lake Park, and then you've got Wards Lake there, things like that. Is the name or renaming associated with a significant contribution or gift? You know, other information. So there's always exceptions and specialty things that want to be brought forward. So we would consider everything, and that a lot of that would be coming from the application. The city isn't going to be doing all of this work on a topic. Individuals will be responding to these questions when they submit their application, because oftentimes those individuals might know more than we do. So, is there any criteria that wasn't considered or that you think needed to be added that we could suggest? Or see how it might be tweaked a little bit to make it more clear?
Michael's
This
got
is
his hand-
Glenn.
Oh. Go ahead, take it, Glenn.
I think you're on the right track. I know that in the past, the Landmarks Board was not consulted with some of the name changes, and of course there's some I didn't even remember were happening, or at least hear that were happening. So I think there needs to be a little bit closer communication between the two boards if you're going to take the lead on the renaming. And that's my input for right now.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Michael's got his hand up. Michael,
Yeah, my comment, I kind of went along with that. At the beginning, we said that once we receive an application, we're going to share it with the Landmark Board, but nowhere do we inform them what our recommendation to the City Council is going to be. Do we need to do that?
Oh, that's a great point, is to share that with, well, council's asking us for the recommendation, but from a process, it would be nice to give that feedback back. Good job.
But and just for point of clarification, we would ask Landmark Heritage Board for their review and input, and then that input would then be part of the Parks Board review, right? In that order.
Correct.
That sounds good to me, Glenn.
Thank you, Glenn. Any other comments on the review criteria? Seeing none, I only had one comment to make, and I'm going to use a popular culture reference that I vaguely remember, but I don't know if it was a Navy or a yacht being named, but they had put it out to the public, and the name of the public voted on this boat was Boaty McBoatface. And it's just kind of silly, and you know, kind of with this internet age, and on a certain level, there's a certain brilliance to it. But do we want to have criteria in there that says, you know, a silly name to, you know, that really doesn't make sense or pertain to it, could just be, you know, lifted from consideration, unless, you know, something intriguing like that, the community sees benefit in that process. But all the other criteria to me says we're not looking for that. So do you have a bullet point or something that says, you know, and I don't know how to phrase it right now, but just silly names or silly suggestions can be tossed aside and don't deserve full consideration. I don't know.
I think she's got that. How will the new name create an enduring legacy?
There you go. And maybe it's covered in that criteria. So that, I think that's a good comment, Alan. Thank you.
And some people have silly names. I mean, that could be a regular name, right? I mean, so I think that's part of the consideration.
Okay, and that's fine. Like I say, it was something that I had popped in my head as I was reading it, so I thought I'd throw it out there. We'll make another call. Anyone else for comments? We have Vito's got some comments on the criteria. Go ahead, Vito.
Yeah, Jason, sorry, I had some connection issues and I was out, but as long as you can hear me, thought about maybe some public piece. Like, in other words, once we get all this information and we pull it all together, is pull a couple public meetings. This is what we're looking at. This is what we're reviewing, and get the public's input at that time before we kind of finalize. And it could be at one of our meetings. It could be at a joint meeting with the Lakewood Heritage. But get another public input. It's kind of like the petition, right? The petition gets feedback, but when you get a petition going, you could almost do you oppose this or do you support it, and have two columns, and then you're getting dual information with the petition.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
with the public meeting, you're going to get that too, right? You're going to get the positives and the negatives. Now, I don't want to make this a big deal, but it is an important element to include. So the addition of a public meeting, or one or two.
Sure. No, I think that's great. Great idea. And that just gets to getting the word out and more people knowing, which we know is an issue and been a concern brought up already tonight. So. All right. Thank you, Vito. Any other commentary on criteria? I'm not seeing any. So perfect. Do we need to make a motion, Mary? Do we need to move this forward, or just kind of the conversation will be captured and shared, move forward?
I mean, I think we've got a lot of good information, and so maybe what we'll, we have our council member Anderson has his hand up.
I see him now. Councilmember Anderson, you have the floor.
Yeah, I apologize for the static display here, but I have to work off a phone since I forgot my computer. I think Mary's covered two of the most important things that the council was concerned about. One is having some threshold, and there wasn't, I don't think, any great discussion on what that should be. But the concern that developed from the Claudia Thomas request was not the request itself as much as the fact that one person could initiate the process, and that could create a lot of work for your committee and for the city that was unwarranted when it was contemplated that there would be broad public support. But what does that mean if you don't have some finite definition of that? The second is clarifying the request. That request bounced around, and as it's been brought up, to have the public give input and comment and get a recommendation, it should be the request that comes in is the one that's considered. And the third one is just kind of my more personal comment on on something that I don't think has been considered yet, and that is what happens if the council wants to do something. I personally am in favor of the petition process being whatever level being the threshold, except if the council wishes to have something considered and refers it to the committee, because the council, of course, could always change the rule. So would eliminate that unnecessary step if the council was confident that it wanted to move forward and get public comment. It could always jump the rule. So I would suggest that there be a dual track there. But that's all I had.
Councilmember Anderson, I think that's duly noted, and that was some comments that the Parks Board made initially after reviewing this the month after the public hearing, is that oh shoot, now I lost my train of thought. Oh.
I think what we'll add, Jason, we'll bring this back with a little bit more summarized of what we heard tonight. So I thought we got some great feedback tonight. Is that we would not only we would clarify the process if it's a council request, not just citizen request. So
yeah, and that's where I thought the council should be able to jump the line. They're the ultimate. They're providing us the direction. If they kick it down to the board for consideration, I think that'd be very much respected, because I think we should have a say in that process too. And then it comes back. But yeah, I don't think the council should have the need to do a petition. Any other comments? I'm not hearing any, so with that, I think we can close the city naming and policy. discussion, and it looks like we are going to take our next discussion, which is a parks touring map partnership discussion, which is, I know, on the Landmark and Heritage Board's work plan. And so I believe we're going to get a staff report from Courtney on this one. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you,
Perfect.
Chair. Good evening, everyone. This may be a relatively short discussion, but one item that is on the LHAB's work plan this year is to update our Lakewood touring map, historic Lakewood touring map. The last update was done in 2015, and the primary audience, in addition to visitors that may come into City Hall or the Lakewood History Museum, is fourth grade classrooms. So every year we distribute a copy of this map to Washington State history classrooms for them to deliver to the students. This year, we're looking to add the historic street names from the program that we finished last year. And at our last board meeting, it was also discussed whether or not we wanted to identify city parks and which city parks would make sense to identify on a historic touring map, or if there might be something that the Parks Board already has that would be separate from that and we would just be redundant, or if you thought that that would be something that would be beneficial for us to incorporate. So with that, I can turn it over to my board members if they have any additional comments to provide, or I would welcome any discussion from your team.
Landmark Heritage Board, Glenn, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think parks be added to the historic touring map. It makes it a little bit busy, but that's certainly no problem because we hope it gets busier and busier with history being identified wherever it is. So that's my comment.
Glenn. Anyone else from the Landmark Board want to say anything?
I love the idea of sending fourth graders any map that shows parks any place close to them, even if it's on a separate sheet. I think that's a great avenue of getting people aware of some of the little tiny parks that are in their neighborhood that don't even know they're there.
Courtney, can I ask a question? Tell me, I like the idea as well, and I think we can easily identify those parks without having it be too busy. I'd have to take a look at the map too and see if maybe there's just a way of outlining it or something, but why fourth graders? Tell me why fourth graders? Just because I'm interested in, is it tied to curriculum? Is it just because that's the age you picked that you like best? That's your favorite group? I love my fourth grade teacher. So
yeah. Thank you for the question. It is built into the curriculum for Washington State history. So it is subject to change, I suppose, if Washington State history was to change, but we give it to Clover Park School District office and they distribute. My understanding is that fourth grade is the current audience. And we don't have copies for all students, though that's something that we certainly could consider in the future. But right now they focus it in on the Washington State history class.
Yeah, I think fourth grade has been Washington State history for 40 or 50 years in the statewide curriculum program.
Courtney, I would also think that while we're working with the Nisqually tribe right now on some projects, when I was chatting with them, they are really involved with the state and the Washington State history, and we might want to include that. We're going to actually be having a conversation with them in a couple of weeks. We might want to include that map just to show as one of the many projects we're working on, and there may be something on that map that would be of significance for them to include or for us to identify. So that, and maybe it's at work still or something like that, or Chief Lashai or something like that. So if the board would be open to it, I'd be happy to just have that be we're going to be doing kind of a brainstorming charrette sort of type thing. So that would be really cool to show that you're adding that if the board thinks that might be of significance as well.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you. And I'll give you a copy of the map tomorrow. So you'll have an opportunity to review it, and please include it in that discussion and let me know how we can be involved.
And do you have electronic copy too?
No, currently, so that's another portion of this update. We are also going to be exploring the opportunity to make it virtual, including a virtual tour experience. But for now, phase one is just updating the physical map.
Christina, it looks like Christina has her hand up. We'll have her next.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's good that the Nisqually are involved in these discussions, and I think that they should be made. Also, whatever other tribes were around, I know that still there's like virtually nobody left, but anybody who's interested should be invited. And it's important to remember that the European presence, of course, everybody knows it's only, the last not even 200 years here, really. So I think that we really, when we're talking about history, and I'm a historian by training, we have to remember the thousands of years of history that were here before we got here, before the whites got here. And when we look around, we should see everywhere possible, the native presence, because we're here on their land. And I think it's important to start remembering that more. And on the touring map, I don't think that we've really included too much native history on there. I don't think we should just focus on what we've done as whites, as Europeans, since we got here. It would be nice to, inform the public more about the native presence, because, they were here first, and it's also very, very interesting, obviously. So thanks.
Thank you, Christina. Any other comments? I had a couple that I just want to weigh in. And so I know it's kind of your touring map and landmarks and heritage, but to me, parks are a huge part of our heritage and part of the reason we want to get people. I mean, we invest lots of money in roads, but really our parks is what if you look at all the brochures or advertisements or economic development, you're selling parks, and parks is and the lakes is what makes this community such a beautiful environment to live in. And so whether that means your map is expanding, it's got to get a little bit bigger than an 11 by 17 because there's more stuff. I think that only goes further to show others what we all know we have here in Lakewood. And with that being said, I agree with the native history, but also, we're kind of making history kind of as we speak and today's age. And we've done some different park expansions or different developments and incorporating maybe some of that new history into it would be something that I would welcome, because like I say, we're making strides and doing great things in Lakewood every day, and just because we're doing them now doesn't make them any less historic. So those would be my comments.
Thank you for that feedback. So for our next steps, I will incorporate this into our original mock-up, and we will definitely bring back a revision for your board for recommendation and review prior to its final approval.
Fantastic. Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you.
All right, that's most of our joint business. You're all welcome to stay on and hang out if you want. We got a couple more things, but if you need to leave, we understand that too. And with that being said, we are going to roll on to our monthly director's report from Mary.
I've been out of town the last couple of weeks, so I really don't have much to present. I just wanted to, and I didn't want to go over too many things. I'm really thankful for the participation I'll have tonight. It's great to meet you and see you. And we used to do joint meetings with different groups over the past years. We haven't done that for quite some time, so I think it's really nice to bring our boards together. We certainly have mutual interests. So just want to join us tonight.
Yep. Concur with that. And so any board member comments for the good of the order? I will say, I would just echo Mary's. Thank you for the LHAB board. Fantastic discussion, council members. Appreciate you being here. And with that all being said, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, Vito. Fred's with a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Oh, go ahead. What do you got,
No,
Michael?
Jason, could you just hang on a minute after this?
Absolutely, Michael.
Okay, thank you.
And so with all that being said, all in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
All right.
All opposed? Hearing none, unanimous approval, y'all. Thank you.
See y'all soon.
Have a great evening.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.